David Sullivan had been teaching high school history for 12 years. 12 years of lesson plans and parent conferences and grading papers. 12 years removed from the rank of Major General, from command authority, from sending soldiers into combat. Sullivan taught about wars Sullivan once fought, conflicts Sullivan once directed, but Sullivan never told the students about Sullivan's own service. Never mentioned the 2 stars Sullivan used to wear. Never talked about Iraq, because Iraq meant remembering, and remembering meant facing what Sullivan had done. The interrogation, the confession, the strike Sullivan authorized based on intelligence extracted under duress. 200 people dead. Women, children, all because Sullivan had believed a man Sullivan was torturing. All because Sullivan had been desperate for actionable intelligence. Sullivan had carried that guilt for 15 years, had left the military because of it, had become a teacher to atone, to shape young minds toward peace instead of war. But on a Tuesday morning in September, when a new student walked into Sullivan's classroom, everything Sullivan had tried to forget came walking back. And Sullivan would learn that the guilt Sullivan carried was based on a lie, that Sullivan hadn't been a war criminal. Sullivan had been a weapon, used by people who were still in power, still killing, still manipulating. And they were coming to silence everyone who knew the truth. The student's name was Mahmoud Al-Hashimi, 17, Syrian refugee, quiet, polite, good student. Sullivan welcomed him the way Sullivan welcomed all students, with warmth, with encouragement, with hope that Sullivan could make a difference in a young life. Sullivan taught the class about World War II, about moral choices in warfare, about the consequences of following orders versus following conscience. Sullivan saw Mahmoud taking careful notes, engaged, thoughtful. After class, Mahmoud approached Sullivan. Mahmoud said to Sullivan, "Mr. Sullivan, this lesson about moral choices. Do you believe soldiers can be good people, even if they do bad things?" Sullivan paused. Sullivan said to Mahmoud, "I believe soldiers are people, complex, capable of both good and evil. War brings out extremes. The question isn't whether soldiers can be good despite bad actions. It's whether they recognize those actions as bad and work to be better." Mahmoud nodded slowly. Mahmoud said to Sullivan, "My father says something similar. He was soldier in Syria before we came here. He says war makes everyone guilty, but some carry guilt better than others." Sullivan said to Mahmoud, "Your father sounds wise." Mahmoud said to Sullivan, "He will be at parent-teacher conference tomorrow night. You can tell him yourself." The next evening, Sullivan sat in Sullivan's classroom waiting for parents. Standard conferences, discussing grades, behavior, college plans. Then Mahmoud entered with his father, and Sullivan's world stopped. The man was older, grayer, worn by years and hardship, but Sullivan recognized him immediately. The eyes, the scar on his left cheek, the way he carried himself despite obvious pain. Colonel Rashid Al-Hashimi, Syrian army, the man Sullivan had interrogated 15 years ago, in Iraq, in a black site detention facility. The man Sullivan had subjected to enhanced interrogation techniques, waterboarding, sleep deprivation, stress positions, for 3 days, until Al-Hashimi confessed, gave Sullivan coordinates, said there was a chemical weapons facility there, said it was urgent, said it had to be destroyed immediately. Sullivan had believed him, had authorized an airstrike, cruise missiles, precision ordnance, The facility was destroyed, along with 200 people in the surrounding area. But there were no chemical weapons. The intelligence was false. Sullivan had killed 200 innocent people based on a tortured confession, had carried that guilt ever since, had left the military, had tried to atone, and now the man Sullivan had tortured was standing in Sullivan's classroom, with his son, looking at Sullivan with recognition and something else. Not hatred, not fear, something closer to resignation. Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan quietly, "General Sullivan, I did not expect to see you again, especially not as my son's teacher." Sullivan stood. Sullivan's hands were shaking. Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, "Colonel Al-Hashimi, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did to you." Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "We should talk privately. Mahmoud, wait outside." Mahmoud looked confused but obeyed, left the room, closed the door. Sullivan and Al-Hashimi stood facing each other, 15 years of guilt and pain between them. Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, "I've thought about you every day for 15 years, about what I did, about the people who died because of intelligence I extracted from you. I left the military because of it. I tried to make amends, but nothing can bring those people back. Nothing can undo what I did to you." Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "Sit down, General. I need to tell you something I could not tell you 15 years ago. Something that will change everything you believe about what happened." They sat. Al-Hashimi continued. Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "The intelligence I gave you about chemical weapons, it was not extracted through torture. It was planted, given to me before I was captured, by my own command, Syrian intelligence, working with certain American intelligence operatives. Before we go any further, I need to hear from you. Drop your name and what city or country you're watching from in the comments. Let's see how far this story reaches around the world." Sullivan stared at Al-Hashimi. Sullivan said, "What are you talking about?" Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "I was not just Syrian army officer. I was intelligence officer. I had been working with American CIA, providing information about Syrian weapons, programs, chemical weapons, biological weapons, real intelligence, verified, valuable. But then I discovered something. The CIA operatives I worked with were not just gathering intelligence, they were manipulating it, creating false intelligence to justify military actions, to serve political agendas, to profit from defense contracts." Al-Hashimi paused, then continued, "I threatened to expose them, to report their manipulation to proper authorities. So they decided to silence me. They arranged my capture, made it look like I was caught during routine operations. They gave me false intelligence about chemical weapons facility that did not exist. Then they had you interrogate me, torture me, until I confessed to intelligence they had planted. Then you authorized strike, destroyed the target, killed 200 people." Sullivan felt sick. Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, "But there were no chemical weapons. Why would they want that location destroyed?" Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, Because it was not chemical weapons facility. It was meeting place. Syrian opposition leaders, people working toward peace, toward ending the war. Your strike eliminated them, prolonged the conflict, kept the war profitable. For defense contractors, for weapons manufacturers, for everyone who benefits from endless war. Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, "And you tried to warn me during the interrogation?" Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "Yes, in every way I could without being obvious. I recanted. I contradicted myself. I gave you reasons to doubt. But you were under pressure. Your commanders wanted actionable intelligence. They wanted targets. So you believed what you were ordered to believe. You authorized the strike. And I was released, sent back to Syria, where I tried to rebuild my life. But the same people who used you to commit massacre kept watching me, threatening me, forcing me to stay silent. Until I could no longer stay. Until I fled with my family to Turkey, then to America, as refugees." Sullivan's mind was reeling. 15 years of guilt, of believing Sullivan had tortured an innocent man and killed hundreds based on false confession. But it wasn't that simple. The confession was planted, the torture was cover. Sullivan had been manipulated, used as a weapon by people who wanted those opposition leaders dead, people who wanted the war to continue. Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, Who did this?" Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "I do not know all names, but I know one. Howard Marks, CIA, senior officer. He was my handler. He arranged my capture. He gave me false intelligence to confess. He used you to authorize strike. He profited from continued war." Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, "Howard Marks retired 5 years ago. He's now CEO of Titan Security, private military contractor, one of the largest in the world." Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "Yes. He built his company on profits from wars he helped prolong, from conflicts he manipulated. And he is still doing it. Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan. Anywhere there is war, Marks has his hand, making money, while people die." Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, "Why are you telling me this now? Why not 15 years ago?" Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "Because 15 years ago I had no proof, no evidence, just my word against CIA. I would have been dismissed, killed. My family would have been targeted. But now I have something. Documents, communications, proof of Marx's manipulation, proof of false intelligence, proof of your strike being authorized based on planted confession. I have been gathering it for years. Carefully, secretly, and now I am ready to expose it. But I cannot do it alone. I need someone Americans will believe, someone with credibility, someone who was there, someone who was used the same way I was." Sullivan understood. Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, "You need me to testify, to confirm what happened." Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "Yes. Together we can expose Marks, stop him from continuing to manipulate wars, from profiting from death. But General, you must know, this will be dangerous. Marks knows I am here, knows I have evidence. He has been watching me. And now that you know, he will be watching you too. We are both targets." Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, "If what you're saying is true, if I can help expose the truth, I'll do it. Those 200 people deserve justice. You deserve justice. I deserve to know I wasn't a war criminal, that I was manipulated." Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "You were not war criminal, General. You were soldier following orders. But orders came from criminals. Now we expose them, together." They made a plan. Al-Hashimi would provide the evidence. Sullivan would verify it. They would contact journalists, congressional investigators, military prosecutors. Build a case. Expose Marks and his co-conspirators. Bring them to justice. Finally. But 2 days later, Al-Hashimi didn't show up for their meeting. Sullivan went to Al-Hashimi's apartment, found it ransacked. Signs of struggle. Al-Hashimi was gone. His wife was terrified. She said to Sullivan in broken English, "Men came, American men, took Rashid, said he was terrorist, showed papers, official. I could not stop them." Sullivan felt cold dread. Sullivan said to her, "Where's Mahmoud, your son?" She said to Sullivan, "At school, I think. I hope." Sullivan raced to the school, found Mahmoud in Sullivan's classroom, safe, but scared. Mahmoud said to Sullivan, "Mr. Sullivan, where is my father? Men came to our home, took him. My mother is crying, she does not understand." Sullivan said to Mahmoud, "Your father is in danger. People he was trying to expose have taken him. We need to help him. But first I need you to tell me, did your father give you anything? Documents, files, anything to keep safe?" Mahmoud hesitated, then nodded. Mahmoud said to Sullivan, "He gave me flash drive, said to keep it hidden, said only to give it to someone I trust if something happened to him." "I trust you, Mr. Sullivan. You are a good teacher, good man. My father said so." Mahmoud gave Sullivan the flash drive. Sullivan reviewed it that night. It contained everything. Communications between Marks and Syrian intelligence, financial records showing payments, orders to plant false intelligence, records of the interrogation facility, proof that Sullivan's authorization for the strike was based on manufactured evidence, proof that Marks had used Sullivan as a weapon to commit assassination disguised as legitimate military action. Sullivan also found a list. 23 names. People who knew about Marks's manipulation. People who'd been silenced. 17 were listed as dead. Various causes. Accidents, suicides, combat casualties, all within 5 years of the incident. 6 were listed as detained, including Al-Hashimi, being held in undisclosed locations, disappeared by the same intelligence apparatus that had used them. If this story is gripping you, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, your name and city. These stories need to reach everyone. Sullivan made copies of everything, sent them to multiple journalists, to congressional oversight committees, to military investigators, to human rights organizations. Made sure the evidence was distributed, protected, couldn't be suppressed. Then Sullivan went public, held a press conference, identified Sullivan's self as retired Major General David Sullivan, told the story about the interrogation, the false intelligence, the strike, the 200 deaths, the manipulation, all of it. Showed the evidence, named Howard Marks. The response was immediate. Media firestorm, congressional hearings, criminal investigations. Marks was arrested. His company was raided. Evidence was seized. The conspiracy was exposed. Marks and 7 co-conspirators were charged with murder, fraud, conspiracy, war crimes. The trial lasted 8 months. The evidence was overwhelming. All 8 were convicted. Marks got life in prison. And Al-Hashimi? He was found. held in a CIA black site, along with 4 others from the list. All were released, given pardons, compensated. Al-Hashimi returned to his family, to Mahmoud, to the life they'd tried to build in America. Sullivan attended Al-Hashimi's homecoming. Al-Hashimi embraced Sullivan. Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "Thank you, General, for believing me, for fighting with me, for fighting with me, for giving me back my family." Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, "Thank you for trusting me, for showing me the truth, for letting me be part of stopping them." Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "We both were victims. Both were used. Now we both are free. The guilt you carried was not yours to carry. The blood on your hands was put there by others. Now you know. Now you can heal." Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, "Can we, after everything, after 15 years? Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "We already are. Look at us, former enemies, standing together, having stopped real enemies, having saved lives by exposing truth. This is healing. This is redemption. Not forgetting, not erasing, but transforming pain into purpose, guilt into action. That is how we heal." Sullivan returned to teaching, but different now, lighter. The guilt that had weighed on Sullivan for 15 years was gone, not because the deaths didn't matter, they did, but because Sullivan understood now. Sullivan hadn't been a war criminal. Sullivan had been a victim, used, manipulated, and Sullivan had done what victims can do when they learn the truth. Sullivan had fought back, had exposed the real criminals, had stopped them from using others the same way. Mahmoud continued in Sullivan's class, graduated with honors, went to college, studied international relations, wanted to prevent wars, to expose manipulations, to make sure what happened to his father and Sullivan never happened to others. He wrote his college essay about them, about 2 men from different sides who became allies against common enemies, about redemption and truth, and the power of confronting the past. Years later, Sullivan would retire from teaching, would be invited to speak at military academies, at intelligence agencies, at congressional hearings, about manipulation, about false intelligence, about the importance of verifying sources, of questioning orders, of recognizing when you're being used as a weapon instead of serving as a soldier. Sullivan would tell them about Al-Hashimi, about the interrogation, about the guilt Sullivan carried, about learning the truth, about fighting to expose it. Sullivan would tell them, question everything, verify independently, trust your conscience, because the greatest danger isn't the enemy you face. It's the one who controls you, who uses you, who makes you believe you're fighting for right when you're really serving wrong. That was Sullivan's legacy. Not the 2 stars Sullivan once wore, not the campaigns Sullivan commanded, but the truth Sullivan exposed, the conspiracy Sullivan helped destroy, the lives Sullivan saved by refusing to stay silent, by choosing truth over comfort, justice over peace. And Al-Hashimi? Al-Hashimi opened a small restaurant, Syrian food, in the same Ohio town where Sullivan taught. They became friends, real friends, not just allies but brothers, bonded by shared trauma, by shared fight, by shared victory over the people who'd tried to destroy them both. They would meet for coffee, talk about their families, about their lives, about the war they'd survived. Not the war in Iraq, but the war against the truth. The war that powerful people wage to hide their crimes. That war they'd won, together. Mahmoud would join them sometimes, would listen to their stories, would understand that enemies can become friends when they recognize common enemies. That healing comes not from forgetting, but from confronting. That redemption is possible even after terrible things. Even after 15 years of guilt and pain and lies. One day, sitting in Al-Hashimi's restaurant, Sullivan said to Al-Hashimi, "Do you ever wish things had been different, that we'd never met, that you'd never been captured?" Al-Hashimi thought about it. Al-Hashimi said to Sullivan, "I wish 200 people had not died. I wish we had not been used. I wish Marx and his kind did not exist. But I do not wish we had never met. Because meeting you, fighting with you, stopping them together, that gave meaning to the pain. That made the suffering count for something. We turned our worst moments into our greatest victory. That is not something I wish away." Sullivan understood. The interrogation, the torture, the false confession, the deaths, the guilt. All of it had led to this, to the exposure, to the justice, to the friendship, to the proof that even the darkest manipulations can be overcome, that truth eventually wins, that victims can become heroes, that enemies can become brothers. That was enough. It would always be enough. And somewhere, in a classroom in Ohio, a young teacher who'd never worn stars taught students about moral choices in warfare. Taught them Sullivan's story. Taught them Al-Hashimi's story. Taught them that the greatest battles aren't always fought on battlefields. Sometimes they're fought in courtrooms and newspapers and congressional hearings. Sometimes they're fought by retired generals who become teachers and refugees who refuse to stay silent. Sometimes the real war is against the people who start wars for profit. And sometimes, against all odds, the good guys win. That was the lesson. That was the truth. That was what mattered. Two men, different sides, used by same evil, united against it, victorious together, friends forever. That was the story. That was the legacy. That was enough.